everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or wherever you are. I'm Amanda Lang, and it's time once again for Alexa Developer Office Hours. I'm really excited today because we're going to have a chat with our certification team. Hi, folks. Hi, everybody's from Twitch. Nice to see you. Nice to see y'all tuning in today. And I don't have any more preamble for you this morning. And they have like a lot of content and really good announcements. So I think we're just gonna jump right into it. No ad pre-roll. Yeah, I got a comment that we were seeing ads. I think I turned off ads. So if you're still seeing ads, you maybe only see them like during the last 10 minutes of the broadcast, but you shouldn't see them before the broadcasts, which I think should help for folks that are tuning in and don't want to necessarily see ads. At twitch.tv, they have like a little ad widget, and I messed with it to make sure we didn't see any pre-roll. You had a 1 minute pre-roll? All right. Well, we're still trying to work the bugs out on that. Hyundai, watching an ad now? Oh, gosh. Okay. I'm going to talk to people at Twitch about how we can get that turned off, but y'all are fantastic for waiting. If it is a pre-roll, it should happen during that countdown part at the very beginning. And not everybody will see them. So I'm going to keep messing with that and making sure that we can see less of that, because I know you aren't here for that. You're here to talk about Alexa development with the crew that's going to be on today. So without further preamble, I'm going to introduce Marce, Monica, and Alberto, and they're going to be showing you a little conversation about certification, and particularly in LATAM countries. So for those of you that might be joining us on the VOD later, we're going to talk a little bit about Spanish and I think Portuguese language localization and certification. So without further ado, let me bring on the folks. Hello, good morning. How are
Hey,
you
good
doing
morning.
today?
Pretty good. Thanks for asking.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us on Office Hours. I know it's everybody's first time on the show, yes?
Yeah, it is the
You're right,
first
yeah.
time.
That's the first time. We are excited to be here with you. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have you. I know we have a lot of folks out there in non-English language speaking communities, and they always like to hear a little bit from how things are in other regions, from the other parts of the world that we support as Alexa. So let's go ahead and get started with what you're here to talk about today, which is certification.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I'm going to be the first presenting the topics. Today, we're going to be seeing topics about the skill presentation guidelines, invocation name guidelines, using the Alexa simulator in the developer console. Also, the certification requirements for privacy policies, rich media recommendations, and smart home skills, like how to avoid the failures.
Nice.
Yeah, the first thing that we're going to be reviewing is the titles in the skills. In that part, we are going to be expecting to receive skills with a title free of typographical errors or grammatical errors, and also must be relevant to the skill functionality. For example, if we have a skill that the name is Carfax, we are expecting to have the skill functionality about giving us facts of cars. We are not expecting the skill, receiving or giving facts about plants, for example. So it must to be relevant to the core functionality of the skill.
You had a presentation as well. I don't see your screen share active, but if you wanted to show that off, you can.
Oh yeah, just 1 second. I missed step 1. Can you see it
That's
now?
okay. No problem. Yeah, let's go ahead and put that on. Because certification, they're always so prepared. Compared to me, I usually just go off the cuff a lot of the time, but y'all are very prepared. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Yeah.
Perfect.
So you were saying really important first step. Oh, my face is hidden under the. That's okay. I get to hide today.
Yeah. We were mentioning that it is expected to have no typographical errors or grammatical errors and have relevancy with the title of the skill with the functionality of the skill. Then we have the skill description. In that part, we are expecting to have they have the explanation on, or like the description of how the skill is going to be working, or like the functionality of it. It also has to be written in the same language as you are presenting in the Alexa account. For example, if I'm choosing Spanish US, we need to have the description of the skill in Spanish. and also we are expecting to do not have grammatical errors. And if you are going to be including like example phrases, it has to be worded correctly. We including the wake word when the example phrase is intended to show how to use the skill and how to invoke it, because that is the only way how the users are going to be knowing how to use correctly your skill. And if the example phrase is not correct or is like formatted in the correct way, they are not going to be able to invoke it or like try to use intensive the skill or so. So that is why it is very important.
So
It also,
definitely
yeah,
don't use like a dodgy Google translation to post your skill description. Make sure it's actually grammatically correct, right?
exactly,
That's right.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the next part that we're going to be mentioning in here is about the word skill itself, because that word doesn't need like a translation. That is
Oh,
like the
okay.
global way how we know skills for Alexa. So we normally sometimes receive like the word habilidad, which is a skill in Spanish, or habilidade in Portuguese, and we
Mm-hmm.
don't need that word translated. So if you are going to be using or like doing a multi-local skill with ESPT, German, or so, the unique word to use to refer to skills is going to be a skill,
Oh, no
not
matter
other
what
one.
country.
Yeah,
Ex-
that is a common failure that we have in the description,
mhm,
and it will be better to avoid this to add the related translation like habilidad for Spanish, habilidade for Portuguese. So it will be better to have a just a skill. We know the skills are like apps for Alexa, but for us, for Amazon and Alexa, it is just a skill, the word skill. So we don't need to translate it.
mhm.
Good advice.
Exactly, exactly. And also we are going to be, when we are going to be referring to enable or disable words, we need to use the correct one or the ones that we use in the life skills. For example, for PT, which is Portuguese, the word to use is ativar for smart home and flash briefing skills. For mobile apps, it's going to be iniciar, and archivar for desktop or apps. And the same is going to be for Spanish. The words to use, it will be activar, permitir uso, iniciar, o desactivar skill. That will be the same as we were explaining for the skill word, which doesn't need to use another word to explain what we use, because it tends to confuse people. If we are using, for example, iniciar for one thing and another expression for other, it can confuse the customers.
Yeah.
I see.
And
Ex-
we and the developers can find these words in each marketplace that we have, like for Spain or Mexico, Portuguese. So when they are going to enable the skill, they are going to find these correct words that we're explaining right now. And I would like to mention that for description is the first thing that customer see before opening the skill. So that's why it is better to have all the details. How is the functionality, how they can use the skill, how they can navigate through the skill, and the users we able to use it, and they can have more active users, more
Mhm,
monthly active users. So that's why we encourage to have a good description, since the users are going to be able to use the skill correctly, right?
Yeah,
mhm.
makes sense. You've got some comments on your sample description there. Is there a skill that lets you use the Xbox One with Alexa?
Well, we have a lot of skills
Yeah.
Yep.
with
Excellent. Excellent.
different functionalities. Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
that's why we added the example in there, because if you see only putting like play games with Alexa or using Alexa, it doesn't give any context to the user. In the other way, in the other one, you're going to be knowing which device you're going to be able to interact with, and like a kind of description of what type of games are you going to be finding in there. So the more information that you give to the user, more attractive it's going to be for them.
Very cool.
And then we're going to be moving with the example phrases
Mm-hmm.
requirements.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my turn. Well, I'm Alberto. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
And yeah, we're going to talk about the example phrases. This is a pretty important part for, well, of the skills, right? Because this is part of the customer facing information. Usually the ones that introduce end users to how they can interact with the skills, right? How they can launch the skills, how they can, let's say, trigger a specific functionality within the skill when you are in an open session, for example. And well, to start, well, you will see these example phrases. Well, they're usually displayed to customers under the start by saying section here in the Alexa app, right? Where can you modify or actually create example phrases for your skill? Well, you have to go to the distribution tab of the developer console, and in the Amazon's retail website, you can find them right underneath the skill icon, if I'm not mistaken, in form of text bubbles. Actually, that's where you find them. But yeah, so they're pretty important. Usually, we have, well, you have the ability to include three main example phrases, but as Marcy was saying, you can include more in the detailed description of the skill. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Thank you, Marcy. And well, we can divide the example phrases into two different types.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, well, we have two, right? Modal requests and one-shot requests. Let's start with the modal requests. We can divide them also into two different subtypes. First, the ones that are used to invoke a skill or launch a skill, right? That are usually composed by a wake word, launch phrase, launch word, which are the ones that you see at the bottom: open, ask, start, right? And the invocation name of the skill. So let's say, for example, if we have a skill that is named animal sounds, right? The way you would, and the invocation name of that skill is animal sounds as well, the way you would compose a modal request to launch the skill or to invoke it would be Alexa, then open and animal sounds, right? And then on the other side, you can also include just a simple utterance. What I mean with a utterance is the phrases that you add to the intents in the interaction model to actually reach those intents, right? So let's say this animal sounds skill has an intent that is named to play sounds, and you add a phrase to it, play cat sounds, right? That's what I refer with a utterance, right? You can include also that type of utterances or phrases within the example phrases to help users understand how they can interact with the skill in an open session, right? So, yeah, those are the two different type of model requests. One big recommendation, if you're just going to include a utterance, like for example, play cat sounds, right? And it is not intended to invoke the skill or launch it, then do not include a wake word next to it because it is not since it is not intended to launch the skill, you should not put a wake word next to it, right?
Uh,
Just the utterance would be enough.
so
Yeah,
that would be with like I was already inside the skill and I already have the
that's
skill
right.
active, then I don't need to include the wake word again, basically.
That's exactly, yes. The
Right.
way you said it is, yeah, the best way to explain it. And one more thing, well, the that I would like to mention is that the first example phrase, this is a rule and this is very important. The first example phrase of the skill must include the wake word and the invocation name, because well, it's usually the one, well, the first example phrase the users will see, right, and the one that will help them to actually navigate through the skill or actually launch the skill, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
must include the wake word and the invocation name. If you want, you can avoid, let's say, a launch word, but always include the wake word and the invocation name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's go to the next one, which would be the one-shot requests, right? In case you don't want, let's say, yeah, thank you. In case you don't want to, let's say, go through that process of launching the skill and then waiting for the welcome prompt to be provided by the skill and saying that utterance to actually trigger the functionality that you want to interact with. You can do it in one shot, right? With a one shot request. Usually, these one shot requests are composed by a wake word, the launch word, the invocation name of the skill, a connecting word, which would be phrases like to, for, things like that, right? And a utterance, once again, just as you said, the phrases you would find within the interaction model, right? What's inside of the skill. And let's say once again with that example that I gave you a while ago, you have a skill that is called animal sounds, the invocation name animal sounds, and you have a utterance, play cat sounds, right? How would you
Mm-hmm.
compose a one-shot request? Alexa, ask animal sounds to. play cat sounds. So that would immediately direct that request to that intent, right? To the play sounds intent, let's say, and it would play the cat sounds right immediately. We have without having to go through that process, right? Of having to listen to the welcome prompt and actually have the chance to reply, right? You will get it right immediately. So yep. So those
Nice.
are two different type of requests you can have. And yep, uh, basic explanation of the wake word. Well, we have multiple, right? Alexa,
Hmm.
Echo, but the preferable would be Alexa.
Right.
So
In your
you want
examples, you want to list Alexa as the word.
that's right, yes.
Mhm.
And launch word, just as I said, right? These launch phrases could be well, open, ask, start, launch, begin, right? And let's go to the next one. I'm sorry.
So I got a
I
couple
just
questions in chat. I'm going to
Yeah,
go ahead
of
and
course.
address. Some question from Sheriff on LinkedIn. Hey, it's my first time connecting. What is the context? So today we're talking, if you missed the very beginning, but we're talking about certification, and in particular, certification in some Spanish speaking and Portuguese as well, Brazil countries. So any time certification you want to work non-English speaking, these are some of the things to pick out and notice. But also general certification, we showed some other examples. This is always important for any certification to get this wake word and structure right. So we're talking about common cert failures. A lot of times people get their skill built, they're excited to show it off, and then they drop they fail the certification and they go through this whole process of they drop it on, they fail certification. So we really want to just kind of prevent some of those basic errors that people make, right? And make sure that they can get through the smooth process the first time. I also see a comment from Brian Tarbox, one of our regulars here, and champion. Thank you for joining us as I often do. And he's I made a Spanish version of my football, that's soccer for Americans, but football skill, and found translations to be non-trivial. And I think there's a good question there, which is if you want to support other countries, but you don't necessarily speak the language natively or know all the idioms, what's a best practice? Should you get help with a translator who knows all the phrasing?
Yep, I think that would be the best recommendation because I mean sometimes as just as you said, if you use a translator like let's say Google Translator,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it would help you also obviously with the translation, but sometimes the context would not be the same, like the grammar maybe would not be okay. So
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, that's why it is very important maybe to get someone that is a native speaker to just to revise it and make sure that it is okay.
And the question, what programming language is used to collect the that's a very long question, but there's plenty of programming languages that we support. You might want to check out our documentation on that and you could learn more. Actually, I think the best place to go is to our starting page, and I'll make sure because we just updated our documentation recently with some new, oh, that's our YouTube. I'm gonna get the documentation page up on the screen in a second here. But let's go ahead and go to your next slide.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in there before moving to the next one that we specifically asked to have the wake word as Alexa because to be able to use computer or Echo, the customer needs to change that in the Alexa app. So it's not going to be by default, and the one that is coming by default is Alexa. So the best way to address that in the global way, it's going to be with Alexa. But then the user can change it, and the example phrase the user needs to understand that the new Echo or computer, it's the new wake word, and the example phrase needs to be said with that one.
Right up on the screen, I put a little comment about our Getting Started series. If you've never made an Alexa skill before and you do want to get started, there's one place that you can go. You can go to alexa.design/start and check that out. And folks are also saying, I purchased translation service from Fiverr or hired a Spanish speaking translator. Very nice. Cool. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting, but I always like to acknowledge the folks that are here on chat as well.
Sure.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for helping with us. Okay, for the next one, it is invocation name. So as Alberto said before, so the example phrase require an invocation name that is usually in the first one, in the first example phrase. So this is the invocation name you assign to your skill on the skill information, and will be able to invoke to reach the endpoint of the skill. So that's why it's so important to add it. Also, they can use connecting words, right? like and, to, for, when. For Spanish is y, de, para. So in this case, they can use it to have a specific, when they are going to invoke the skill, to launch a specific utterance, right? Like, for example, Alexa, open quiz, Spanish quiz to start playing, right? So they're going to use the connecting word to start to play or the quiz, right? And for Spanish is the same. Alexa, abra quiz de español para que empiece a jugar. So that is how it works. So that's why they can use connecting words to use an example phrase that for us is in one shot. So it's going to the intent exactly to start the quiz. And for utterance, if they're going to use just the utterance, so these are required that should be modeled based on the sample utterance that is in the model info, right? So it's required to have it modeled, and it would be better to don't have the wake word, the Alexa, because then it's not going to invoke the skill, right? The Alexa we use is when we invoke the skill. For utterance, they can just use the sample utterance that is in the interaction model to be able to use it while they interact with the skill. And this is the examples. As you can see, the examples that you are going to find it in the description tab for the developer console. And you are able to add 3 example phrases like this one: Alexa, open home cooking, and Alexa, ask home cooking how to make pancakes. And as you can see, there is that one shot example phrase that we use to tell us how to make the pancakes, to invoke the skill and tell us how to make the pancakes. And the third one, so it is to use while you are navigating through the skill once you invoke first.
Right, different ways to ask. So you could use your wake word and then just immediately launch into a request to the skill, or you can just use your wake word and have it open up the skill.
Exactly.
As the first example, right?
Yes.
And I also see a comment here. My idea would be to add more ugs and ums into the mix. You know, if you have a feature request, we also have a page to go to for that. Let me put that one up on screen. That would be our user voice, and I have to make sure I find it and all things at the link, but not. Look up Alexa user voice online and see if you can find our forums, because if you have a feature request, that's the place to post them. Of course, we always are writing down everything everybody's saying in this chat as well. We have our behind the scenes team, so I think it is really interesting. And then there's a follow-up question. In other languages, what would the ug or be if you were putting a pause? I think it just varies from language to language, right?
Let me see.
When people pause in Spanish, what do they have a particular phrase that they use? It's not usually right?
No, it's actually the same, yes. Like,
it's the same.
yeah, pretty much, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But when I used speak in Spanish, I used to have like a lot of the naming here is muletillas, so I keep repeating like one word when I stop talking. But it's like when I'm very nervous in Spanish, I'm showing that to everybody because can't stop saying those things. But it is the same, like and home.
Oh, and thank you for posting that user voice in chat. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's our developer forms for voting. Thanks. Keep those questions and comments coming. It's always great to have interaction with everybody. And also thanks to our DAG team for answering some of the questions on the chat as well. So invocation name.
Yes.
We talked about this a little bit, but go ahead.
Yeah, we are going to check the requirements, like and something that we can avoid to have the correct invocation name, because it is important. It is the name that represents the skills that the user want to use and how they are going to invoke the skill. So that's why it is important. We recommend you to have it friendly and easy to remember by customers, so they can interact like every day. So it is better to have it like easily and friendly invocation name. And let's continue. The invocation name must be written in each language you choose to support, and it doesn't have any grammatical errors. It is so important because then Alexa is not going to understand well if the invocation name is no is that if it has a grammatical error or is not going to reach the endpoint. So that's why it is required to have a good grammar. And also for another language, for example, if the Spanish version of your skill must have an invocation name written in Spanish, the invocation name may contain English words if these words are commonly used. So Alexa will be able to understand.
Right.
The letters in an acronym must be separated by periods and spaces, like that example. If they're going to say maybe quiz A with a period, space, B, period, I'm sorry, B, period, space, C, period. So that is how to be written. It is so important because that is how Alexa is going to understand the acronyms. And one word, for one word invocation name, it is required, if it is a brand, so it is required to add a proof of rights in the testing instructions that it is in the distribution tab for the developer console too. And the invocation name does not contain any wake words for Alexa, Echo, computer, skill, app. So we can avoid to add that.
Right.
Something, something.
Your
Sorry.
sample phrase will include the wake word, but your actual skill shouldn't because that's already something somebody's going to say, right?
Yeah, it's already there, and it could be overlapping with Alexa app. So that's why it would be better to don't include it.
There is like a specific error that we're receiving in our queue. We already add like a warning or like yeah, like a pop or something like that when you don't use it correctly. But before that validation in the developer console, we were receiving radio skills in Portuguese without the accent mark in the A. So that now if you don't put or add the accent mark, it's going to be like letting you know that you need to add it. But before that, we were receiving a lot of radio skills in Portuguese that were not being understood by Alexa, and that makes difficult for us to make the certification, and we may end rejecting the skill. So that's why it's very important, like to look for the accent mark or grammatical in each language to be able to write it as Alexa needs to understand it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, most of the common failures that we receive in the Portuguese local, for example, is just the one that Marcia mentioned. If you have a radio skill and it includes the word radio, then in Portuguese you have to make sure that it is accented properly, right? Because
Oh.
Portuguese it has an accent on top of the letter A,
Oh.
rádio, right? But yeah, that's why, right? And most of the time, yeah, we get skills with the word radio within the invocation name, but it is not accented. And what it would cause is what something that Monica mentioned, the skill, well, the endpoint and the skill would not be reached. Because I mean, Alexa would understand the word radio with the accent, and if you don't have it in your skill in your invocation name, then it's going to be impossible to reach the skill's endpoint, right? And one other thing to mention is, well, this about tokenization, right? When you have an acronym or an abbreviation, like for example, for a radio skill, FM, you have to make sure that it is tokenized, that you have those
Oh.
periods and spaces between letters. If not, yeah, you would have also a problem with, reaching the skills endpoint as well. So that's very important.
Yeah, for the next one, the brand names. Yeah, we know that there is a lot of brand names and they made up, right? So it is allowed if you provide the proof of rights that is in the testing instructions. And if it is a common brand name, you can use it in a refreshment manner. You can add it like an official, unauthorized, the words like fan or fandom, for or about, right, in order to use the brand name, right? And this is the common examples that we get, and that's why we emphasize in the tokenization for the words, like for English, quiz, B period space and period space X period. So that's why we emphasize too much in this, since it's so important, so we are able to reach the endpoint and we can just certify the skill. And for Portuguese, like Marce and Alberto says, the accent in the word A, and that is radio in Portuguese, um, Radio Moderno FM, right? It has to be tokenized, the words FM. For Spanish, Música de los 80 FM. For numbers, it has to be written as we said, right? The number is 80, but we had to use the words. That is 80, right? Or for the English 80s, right? So in this case,
Right.
we had to use
Música de los
how
80.
we pronounce, right? How it's written.
Right. So you don't write out the number, you write it out in the
Yeah,
word instead. Right. And that abbreviation thing is interesting because I think our instinct would be to just type the letter without the period and space, but it won't be registered that way.
That's right.
yeah, yeah. Alexa is not going to understand actually, so that's why we're not able to reach the endpoint.
That's right. Yes.
Got another question in the chat. In English, I use the emotion tag to enhance the experience. Is that supported in these languages as well, in Spanish and Portuguese, the emotion tag?
I'm sorry. The
Not sure. Maybe it's a question for Dag. The emotion tag. I think it's when you put your text in a little emotion, like around the outside. Not for the invocation phrase though.
Okay.
No, for the invocation, no. For invocation, it is just the common words,
Right.
just the common, no, like tags or emotokens.
We'll look into that question. Let's talk a little bit about the simulator. This is useful for anybody building a skill, right?
That's absolutely right. Yes. I mean, you can take advantage of the Lexus simulator to actually find out, I mean, if your skill is okay, if actually the responses, right, provided by the intents, by the welcome prompt, the help prompt, etc., are properly configured within the skill code, right, within the skills manifest. So you can take advantage of this simulator to actually test that. Let's see what else. Oh, one more thing also to mention is, well, you can you will be able to interact with the skills in the Lexus simulator and also on devices where you have that account set up, right, where you have signed in. And one more thing to mention is, well, the simulator also will maintain the skill session open, right? So you can test this the entire skill flow and make sure that all the intent responses are okay, that if you have used any slots that, well, they work okay as well, right? That the values that you included within them are okay, that they are reachable, things like that, right? So by using the Alexa simulator, it will help you actually avoid this type of common failures like endpoint errors. So, for example, if you have a problem with the welcome prompt or the invocation name, the Alexa simulator will actually help you to find out what could be going wrong, right? And yeah, if you're interacting within this skill and you receive an invalid response, it will actually give you that example, right? So you can go ahead and look at your code and see what could be causing that, right? If you're using maybe a request handler or something else that might be causing that problem. So this is how the Lexus simulator works. One thing to keep in mind is, well, you can see that toggle in the upper left corner where it says test is enabled for this skill. If you have not enabled that toggle, well, you will not be able to use the simulator, right? So make sure you have that enabled. Uh, right there, you will find a couple of fields, right? If you have a multi-local skill, for example, uh, right underneath that toggle, you have where it says English US, right? If you have a multi-local skill, uh, from there you can select actually the locale or the language you want to test, right? So if you have a multi-local skill, that would actually help you. And right next to it, you have a field where you can input what you want to test it in the skill, right? Well, from there you can type the example phrase to launch the skill, and then once you get the welcome prompt, you can type a sample utterance to actually try to maybe trigger a specific functionality. And on the right side, well, you can actually do it also by voice if you click on that mic sign. right? Just to let you
Hmm.
know. And then on the right side of you see, well, you can see the JSON output and input, right? Usually it will tell you which intent was reached, the response, like the process that was completed, to actually get to that response. So it is pretty useful,
Yeah,
and it will be found. Yep. Mhm.
for our first time skill developers in chat, I know the people who are been developing skills for a long time are very familiar with this, but if you haven't developed an Alexa skill before, this is a great way to test your skill without even using a device or even an app. You just do it right in your web browser. And we also had an answer to that question. The emotion tag available in English, German, and Japanese. So not Spanish and Portuguese, unfortunately, but English, German, Japanese, which is interesting.
Thank you,
Yep.
Amanda. Sorry.
Yep, I think.
Yep.
Did you have
Yep.
any other
I
comments
think that.
about the simulator? We can move on to the
No,
next. The next, yeah.
actually, no. Yeah, they can be found in the test tab in the developer console.
Yeah,
That's
it's
how we
right
have
in your
it.
developer console. And if you're a first-time developer, you can develop the app or the skill app directly in the developer console. You don't need any external software. Once you get a little bit more in depth, you can develop just your IDE of choice. But this is a great testing tool. Really important to test all your skills before you try to submit them for cert.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because usually we have common values for endpoint, or maybe some sample uterance that is in the intents. So it will be better if they can use the simulator for beginners, right? So they can check if there is an endpoint error, so they can check right away in the code, right, before sending to certification.
Mhm. Exactly. And the next topic to review is the privacy and policy terms and conditions. Some important things that you need to take into consideration for this is that should be the URL. It should be displayed properly when it open. It should not give any 404 error or something like that coming from internet or something like that. It should direct that it should give you or like take you directly to the privacy section. We are not expecting like to open that URL in the homepage of the website. It should go directly to the privacy part. Also, when the it should be a valid privacy policy when the skill collects personal information, any kind of personal information. And if the skill doesn't collect any customer contact information such as phone number or address or something like that, it is not necessary to add it to the skill. And the last thing, as we already review in the description and other things, is that the privacy policy must be presented in the language selected in the Alexa account. So if it is
Ah,
Portuguese, it should be in Portuguese as well.
Yep. And one more thing to remember is that it must clearly state that it is a privacy policy or a terms of use website, right? If by any chance it does not mention that anywhere, then that would be considered a failure.
Okay.
yeah, and you don't have to go overboard here. If you aren't actually collecting any data, you don't need to talk about what you do with the data you
Yeah, right.
don't collect, right? It's only
Yeah,
important if you're actually collecting data from the user, and then it's required. You have to have a link to a valid privacy policy.
that's
Mhm,
absolutely
mhm.
right. Yeah, most of the common failures that we get sometimes, I mean, there are skills that do not collect any personal identifiable information. Developers provide a privacy policy that maybe does not open up, right? That throws an error message, or that is in a
Right.
different language, right? And they do not need it. So I mean, make sure to include it only when you need it.
Mhm.
Yeah, don't shoot yourself in the foot by
That's
adding
right.
something you don't need to add that makes you fail certification when you didn't even need that in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, like for radio skills, they add the privacy policy, but it is not going to collect any customer contact information, so don't add it. It's not
Mhm.
necessary to add it.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, rich media, we had this feature since 1 year ago, and actually it is a wonderful feature, it says. It's part of the customer facing information, and because developers can add images, videos, and rich media allows customers to understand your skill in detail and drive like or increase an engagement with all the customers. So that's why please ensure that the videos are spoken in the same language, right? And read the captions, signs, other language appears in the customer language, and the images related to the skill. Yeah, it's so important to add that. In the next one, we are going to check how you can see it, how the customers are going to see it. If you see in the skills highlights, you're able to see it, all the images of the skill before enable the skill. So that's why it's going to engage to the users, and we are going to have all the metadata, as we said, that is the icon, the title, the example phrases, the description. That's why we emphasize in this presentation today, because that is the common failure that we have, and we can avoid it, right? And for rich media, we don't allow rich media content that is not suitable for all ages, or with a representation of an Amazon device, or that misrepresents the function of the skill. So that's why it's so important to have images or videos related to the skill, right? How the developer would like to engage our users to have it more active, more monthly active users. So that's why we can engage with the users. This is how you are able to see it in the Amazon marketplaces, in the website. For the next one, this is how you are going to see it for the Alexa app.
Wow.
Like, it's different visual, but it has the same content.
Right.
Right.
So this is for any skill that has a visual component. So it's something that's to be showed on the Echo Show, for example. You want to be sure that any videos or screenshots you use are accurate representation of what the skill looks like, not just something different from that.
Yeah, that is not related to the skill. So we would like to just to have images related to the skill, how they can just how they are going to interact with the skill, so they will be able to see it there in the rich media.
Nice. This is a great thing to add to your skill if you want to have people able to touch stuff on the screen. If they have an Echo Show device, for example, really nice to have that rich media added.
Yeah, they can add the images they're going to see in the device with the screen. So they can add the images that is going to there's going to be when they invoke the skill. So it's going to appear an image. So they can add the same too.
Nice.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the smart home skills and how you can avoid the most common failures. Uh, this is one of the most common failures. I mean, if you have a smart home skill, which obviously is going to work with a specific device, right? We need to test that device, right? So there is some way we can go ahead and create an account and get a device to actually test your skills. So the best way to do it is, well, you provide test account credentials, right? Username and password, which has a device associated to that specific account. And that way we can complete the account linking process and test your skill, right? Test the device, make sure it works, make sure it is online, and also that the right endpoint has been configured for that skill for that locale, right? Where can you include this information? Well, in the testing instructions field in the developer console, right? Now you have separate fields for the username, for the password, and you have also that box where you can put more information, more detailed information. And it is also recommended to include more detailed information. Like, for example, I mean, if you need to download a third-party app to complete the account linking process, make sure it includes that information there, right? You would need to choose a specific region. If there isn't a specific way to link the device to the account when you're completing the account linking process, make sure to state all that information there so that it helps us to complete that account linking process effectively.
Anything that would avoid they would use a specific device, for example, you have to be sure to explain how to use that in your testing.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Mhm.
So let's go here. Mhm. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, thank you. And then, well, what else is important in smart home skills? Well, that the account linking landing page opens without any error, right? We need to make sure that it works okay, that it does not throw any error message. Because I mean, obviously, if it does not work and we cannot complete the account linking process, we would be completely blocked. We would not be able to
Mhm.
test the skill
Mhm.
um, at all. Then, just as Martha was mentioning at the beginning of this session, the description of a skill is pretty important, right? It must include all the information that the user will need to actually, let's say, well, for a smart home skill, how to configure that skill, how to actually get it to work, right? So make sure you include all the account details, like what type of what account you need. So let's say if you have a brand that is called Gamma, make sure you need a Gamma account, right, for being able to use the skill.
Mhm.
If you need any specific software, let's say a third-party app, make sure to include what's the name of that app, where you can download it, and also setup details, right? Like for example, clear set of the detailed set of details, like sorry, detail, yeah, the setup instructions,
Right.
right? Of how where you have to download the app, that then you have to create an account, but then you have to download the Alexa app and then click and enable the skill that it will take you to the account linking landing page, and then you would input those credentials to complete the account linking process. So make sure to include all the information that may help any users understand how to complete that process and how to get the skill to work. One more thing that that you have to include within the detailed description of a skill, the first part of a skill, is what type of devices it supports, right? Because I mean, for example, if it supports all the devices related to your brand, let's say, as I said, you have a brand that is called Gamma, and you have air conditioning, you have light bulbs, you have a washing machine. I mean, if the skill supports each and every one of them, you can put something like this skill supports Gamma devices, right? But if this skill is made only for one specific device, let's say only to control light bulbs, so make sure you put that information there, right? That the skill was meant to be used only with light bulbs of the Gamma brand, right? And then one more thing, and this is one of the most important parts, make sure that within that period, when the scale is being certified, make sure that the account, the test account that you provided, has devices online associated to it that we can use, right? That are functioning properly, that we can use to actually test the scale, right? Use the right example phrases to get that device to work and receive a positive response so we can pass the skill rating and make sure it is okay. So
Other
that's it.
thing to add in there, Alberto, is that sometimes, as we are in different time zones, and we also can
That's right.
certify skills from Spain, for example, for
Mhm.
Spanish, or Mexico, or Portuguese.
Mhm.
Sorry, Brazil. Um, Sometimes we need like the specific schedule for the devices to be online, so we can take that into consideration for certification and
Oh,
be able to test the skill when you have the devices online. Sometimes we don't receive that information. We try to certify the skill and the device is offline, and we have to reject the skill or fail the skill because we are not able like to check if the main functionality is working. So that is something important that you can add in testing instructions. If you need like to be on a specific schedule, we can coordinate that as
mhm,
well.
mhm. So the
That's right.
testing
Yeah,
instructions, as thorough as you can possibly be with the smart home skill, right? The more details you add there, the better, because it makes your job easier by trying to test the skill on a device.
that's right.
Exactly.
Yes, that's very important. I mean, if your devices are only online within a specific period of time, make sure to state that in the testing instructions so that we can test the skill at that time, right? And make
Mhm.
sure we don't reject it just because of that thing. And one more thing is, let's say, what else? I mean, if you, well, make sure also the devices associated to the account are actually the ones that this guy is supposed to control, right? That's one of the things that I also wanted to mention.
Mhm.
And well, I think that's it for smart home skills. That's one of the.
Great.
Oh, one more thing that I wanted to mention. I mean, if you provide test account credentials, please make sure you don't have, let's say, like two-step verification methods enabled. Sometimes we
Oh,
have issues with that. I mean, we try to complete the account linking process. We get a message saying that you must input a code that was sent to a specific email or phone number, and well, we don't have access to that email or phone number, right? So at that point, we are
right.
going to be blocked, and we will not be able to test your skill. So please make sure to disable
Yeah.
them. You
Yeah,
put those
disable the
credentials.
one-time password. The one-time password.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If normally we use two-factor for security, but this is one time when it's really going to harm you for that particular
That's right.
device.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Thank you. That's the end of the presentation. Got through it all in time. Appreciate it. It's been very nice hearing from you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to help.
We had another comment in the chat too.
Thank you.
Heads
Yeah.
up for anyone
Thank you for
creating
the
a visual
questions as
skill.
well. I hope we have cleared it.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I always like to hear from especially teams that are not necessarily US based because I think there's a wide variety of skills available out there. And our developers all over the world, you know, they want to hear from how things are going in different countries and maybe their country or maybe what if they want to localize their skills to different languages. So it's really helpful. It's really beneficial. And certification, you know, it's always a big challenge. I think people just want to know the best practices and the best way to get through. So it's very, very useful. The great team. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Getting complimented as well. Great pleasure. Wonderful. I was reading that comment. If you do make a visual skill, be sure you know that your users can scroll if you need them to scroll. So maybe if you've got like a video, have one that's like halfway off the screen so they can scroll, or maybe just like a little arrow pointing down or something. There's lots of different design methodologies you could use to make people understand that there's a scrolling screen. Because I know people are just used to looking at it as like a one screen. And some apps you don't have to scroll, but some you do. Depends on the widget / skill that you're activating, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And whenever you're getting something passed through certification, be sure you explain all the testing instructions if there's something they should be looking at that they might not notice, or that they should try, or there's a device they need to connect to, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's a good recommendation. Sometimes, for example, we also have cases where developers include intents that might not be relevant to the, might not be related, to the skills core functionality. If they are not also presented or not mentioned in the customer facing information, and well, this is, let's say you added them just because you're going to include a feature in the future, but it is not implemented yet. Make sure you include that information also in the testing instructions, right? That, well, this specific intent is not implemented yet, or this is not relevant to the skills functionality yet. So make sure you don't test it, right? So in that case, we know that we're aware of that, and we won't fail the skill in case we receive an error response for in a specific intent, for example. So that's also something very important to mention in the testing instructions of a skill.
Give yourself the best odds of getting it through by explaining what
That's
the core
right, yes.
functionality of the skill is. Excellent. Well, thank you all for being on the show today. Any parting thoughts before we close out for the day?
Well, I mean, thanks a lot for taking us in consideration to participate here.
Well,
It
thank
was
you.
a really good experience, and well, I hope all the information was really clear and understandable, so it will help
It's
you develop skills.
very great. I so appreciate having everybody on. It was a really good show, and I really am grateful that you gave us some of these good tips. I know our developers will really find it useful. And welcome to anybody who's here for the first time, and welcome back to those of you that have been here multiple times, and also welcome to our view-on-demand viewers. Hopefully the information there was valuable to you as well. So thanks, everybody. I think we're going to call it there. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day, night, or wherever you happen to be.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you.
Good rest of your day. Bye bye.
Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.